Things, folks. So, I'm going to be talking about ENFP today. I'm just going to make that bigger. So then, two important things to remember about this type. I hope I included it, and that's this. NF idealism versus EP fun and adventure and materialism. And so, ENFP can be a very dimensional type in terms of character contradictions, because frequently the ENFP can be Enneagram 7 fixated and go towards that fun and adventure, and on the other hand have this idealism. So there's that tension within them, and then there's the authenticity, the FI and the NF, and then the acceptance and approval. And the reason I've written that it's both FE and NF is that it is approval from others, FE, but it's about the self, approval of the self, of the identity. So there's a bit of ego and FI involved there. So I would also say with the value T and SI that there can be some sort of practical thinking there as well that can sometimes get a tension between idealism and pragmatism in the ENFP, because they have that strong, it depends on the situation, can develop strong tertiary TE. So for example, Carol Linden on the channel, Typology Business, Alicia, a realtor, as they call them in the United States, real estate agent in England. So TE can be well developed. I also know an Estonian ENFP resembler, and I think Estonia has like the 15-year-olds has the highest. Their 15-year-olds have the highest achievement in Europe. So a very good educational system in Estonia, and I've been reading about it for a character. Right then, so these are some sort of outside factors about ENFP. So, slot 1. As we see there in the top left, it's a valued function. So those, I suppose they're turquoise. Those ones in positions 1, 2, 5, and 6. The valued functions, NE, FI, TE, SI. And I suppose, given left to its own devices, ENFP would want to do activities related to NE and FI, and to a lesser extent T and SI, than their non-preferred processes, those in red. Or those in red will be used as a tool to serve their valued functions. And so when we say NE is valued, what does NE value? Well, especially there, you can see that in the in this, but we've got that there about that adventure, those connections. Again, this sort of world as possibilities to explore. Boy, oh boy, ENFP is like the type most likely to have a passport. It really is. They love, especially ENFP, they love, number one type to love traveling, especially to visit other cultures, learn about other cultures, not just for the sort of the sensory aspect of fun and adventure, but really learning about other cultures. ENFP loves that, really do. Fits in with their idealist temperament and their benevolent viewpoint on seeing sort of positive viewpoint of and seeing the upside and just traveling around the world. And sometimes you think, well, why do they go there? That's pretty risky. But you know, they do it. So again, it really is the world as possibilities. And so, yeah, that fun and adventure being with the NE, but it's within, so you've got this EP, NE, frequently Enneagram fixated side, but ENFP is also an NF. So that's the tension within them. Whereas with ENTP, they've not got that NF that's holding them back. So you can see those little bits. If I move it a bit, you can see what I've written there. Yeah, actively exploring possibilities. Yeah, that's the phrase he used. Actively exploring possibilities. And then that difference between the opportunity and the possibility. I think opportunity is a bit more concrete. Yeah, here we go. This is a good point by Shalina. NE is more than just pattern recognition because it does something once the pattern has been recognized. Because that's how, say, I've forgotten the name, personality hacker would define NE. But it's more than that. Lead NE does something with it. Actively pursuing those possibilities. Right. Douglas Adams travelled with Mark Howden, a zoologist, and wrote the book Last Chance to See. But Adams, in that case, ENTP references. And so slot 1 is valued. It's also default in that it's an extroverting function within an extrovert. And it's a club function, meaning that it's an NF function. Now, I'm going to expand a bit on what I mean by default by going to, also what I can do is, just so I don't forget, is I can go over a little bit of the Van der Hoop graphic, because it just so happens that one of the two types he covered was ENFP. So this is probably the first diagram of an ENFP. It's in 1937. The English translation came out in 1939, translated by Laura Hutton. So you can see there the FE is quite strong in ENFP, and also in his ENF. And I've done a video on Van der Hoop's ENFP profile. Basically, writes about this type being charismatic and bringing sort of social change. So it fits the Kersey idea of the advocator, the advocate of social change. This is where we get the stereotype of the social justice warrior. So, or consistent with it. We've got there as you can see with my model, there's a consistency there. We've got the NE, the FI, FE, and NI, all the NF functions, all the NF functions there are strong in, and this is when unhealthy. I'd say this is like the shift to ESTP. Right, so, and then this I can say, because we can get back to the extroverting, the default extroverting, this idea of where is the focus of attention, the world or myself in the world. Now, I would argue, though, that when it's an EN type versus an ES type, there may be a little bit more focus on myself in the world, because the EN type tends to be a bit more self-reflective than the ES type, just because of that abstract, concrete difference, and because of the focus of attention of the NF on, although it's different from the EN type. If you're EN and ENF, so you're going to be abstract, but also the idealist focus on the spiritual, the sort of ephemeral, the immaterial, in the sense of not unimportant, but not unimportant, but in the sense of of where someone sees themselves in the world, the sense of identity and things like that, and so it becomes subjective in the ENF, because they've got those sort of idealist themes going on, even though they are an extrovert. Now, one could argue that is when they're in more of a self-reflective mood, rather than when they're extroverting, they can appear a bit more like ESFP. And as Jeff said, ENFPs are just like ESFPs, except ENFPs believe in stuff. So let's get on to talking about default extroverting. So here we go. What I mean by default and situational. Oh dear, I'm obscuring this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put myself off screen a little bit. I'll just go like that. And I'm going to zoom in here. And I'll read through key parts of this. Nothing too much. But there's an important point. Here we go. This, because there. For extroverting type, default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data such as immediate sensory instinctual data, SE, social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions, and tone of voice signifying feelings, FE. And ENFP is very aware of that stuff because they are extrovert and a feeling preference. We've got facts, numbers, practical application, TE. The world as possibilities, connections between ideas that can be articulated because there. And ENFP is good at all of those because they extrovert a lot, because they're extrovert in preference. And then a note there on instincting. That is bound up with the emotions, especially with touch. It's like, oh, that feels nice. Holy moly. Wow. Ugh. It's an instant reaction there. With that kinesthetic sense, feelings are bound up, feelings and emotions are bound up with it. So, yeah, Jungian extraversion. This is important about passive and active. A manifest relatedness of subject to object in the sense of positive movement of subject interest towards the object. I would say stimulus. One should speak of active extroversion when deliberately willed and of passive extroversion when the object compels it. That would be more the case of the introvert, where you get passive extroversion. But in the extrovert and in the ENFP, it is an active extroversion, and it is usually with seeking possibilities. And usually on the sort of the social plane of meeting people, especially from different cultures. They love that. I know one who studied anthropology. Right. And then when might the... I'll get on. Well, I'm going to cover this now. I should cover it when I get to FI. But, in fact, hang on a moment. I'll cover FI and then I'll get back to that. So, when it will use FI. But I must remember to get back to that situational use of FI. So, I will get back to that. So, we've got here the advocator role, which is an expressive role. And I put here, why Kersey's put compliance. And then I got this from Jeff. Compliance with group and or own ethics. So not adaptive, not utilitarian. In terms of like doing anything necessary to achieve the goal. It's not ends justify the means. Because they are compliant with their own ethics. Unless it's a really, really fun option. And then the ethic might go out of the window. Because remember, EP and Enneagram 7 fixated. So you could have maybe an ENFP socialist that complains about capitalism, and then they whip out their iPhone, which, you know, of all the brands has a very high profit margin. Right. And again, the champion role, but I'll get back to that. And then I'm going to understand, I'm going to get to the subjective nature of this FI by going to that section on what introverting actually means. And then I'm going to get back to feeling. So, situational role. There we go. SI is not as internal as the other introverting functions. However, certain subfunctions are, yeah. We were thinking about FI. And so here I'm going to give some examples of when situationally the extrovert introverts. So, if I do that, I might be able to put myself, I don't know if you're missing me already. Compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's Model G, yeah, it's Galenka, because the Russian letter would be O. It's not an O, because that's O and U, that's a diphthong. Victor Galenka Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g. the ENTP resemble Wilma Twindley, my stage play is introverted as he prays and reflects in soliloquy, but that's beside the point. And it is while she reflects the access is her weakest function FI. However, we're talking about ENFP brand. ENTP is next week. However, the situation includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, Jungian cognitive functions, which are of opposite vertness to the type, e.g., situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert. So, that includes ENFP. Such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder, and that's going to be TI. It's going to be subjectifying. Consider how something might develop or have a moment of inspiration from within. Run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences as a way to interpret it, or pause to search their own feelings, such as judging what move to make in the romantic sphere, or in dilemma where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity. That's a theme of stage play. And this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally, FI. And then I put there about CBT, and then Jungian introversion, about the fact that it's subjective. In fact, he should have just called it, he should have used subjective more and more. I suppose he didn't like to repeat himself. The chief factor is the subject. So, bearing in mind about the chief factor, so when the ENFP gets subjective, when they go towards, I think maybe I should say something about, it's empirical in that these possibilities can be discussed. They're concrete enough to be discussed, but it's very difficult to discuss someone's NI. Because then it's like, okay, I know you feel that, but like when it's NE, it's like you can debate the connection, you can compare it, it's discussable, it's going off something. The possibilities are related to things in the concrete world, and so it's discussable. NI is not as much. It's like an internal strategic vision of either change with objects or people. So again, subjective feeling. So introverting subjective feeling in ENFP. And so very strong function. It's also a wheelhouse function, meaning in your wheelhouse. And I'll show what that means. But I'm not going to read this out because, like, I'm looking at the time, 19 minutes already. So I have to pause that to read it if you want the extra stuff. Right, and I'm also going to put that on screen as well. I'm going to quickly because I've got to get a wriggle on. And it has club functions. All right, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom here. Ben, you have moved along. Then I'm going to go back. So that's that half covered. I'll come back to the other ones. And I'm going to go back to FI. So we've got NE with FI. And these are very informing. Like in terms of interaction styles, all the FPs are informing. And all the MPs are informing. So that might be because NE see lots of different routes, so it's not going to be as directive. This is the way. No, it's more like, well, you could do this, you could do that. And then FI, that aspect of FI that's about relationships. You can also do relationships with FE, like what is the right methods and like socially, and that would vary by culture. But FI is about a sense of personal connection, and going off that subjective aspect. I should have gone on to that one. And the ethics of relations. So you can see how those two together, the NE and the FI, can work well in this sort of a mediating role. And then we've got Kersey. Kersey's got this idea here that ENFP is best at the champion of a cause, the social advocate, and then the healer, which is a reserved version of that, and then lastly the counselor, which is reserved and directive, and so more of a stretch, or ENFP. So, what else about FI? I mentioned the authenticity there. And so there's that tension between possibilities, options, fun, adventure, and then authenticity. And so they sort of want to be in synergy. Oh yeah, so this function here, it's valued, and it's a club function, but it's not default. It's not default. And then we've got third slot. I've got to move on because it's 22 minutes already. So FE, you can see that there. So this is where you get that tension between acceptance and approval and authenticity. So the ENFP is very much aware of the feelings around it, but it's also very ethical. And so it can break the ENFP's heart to go against the sort of family if they don't agree with them. Say something. So there's a certain political issue, and they sort of like go with what they feel is right, because that's part of that. They advocate something that's against, but they also want to fit in. It's a question of valued, unvalued. But so you could say that the FE is a bit of a drag there on ENFP, in that it's sort of like making it feel bad for not going with it's making it feel bad for having to sacrifice these relationships and friendships, maybe sort of tensions with family members over a strongly held conviction. That's like the downside of the FE. You can almost say it's like a negative of the FE in ENFP there, in that it's associated with these negative feelings. But the upside of the FE there is that it makes ENFP more expressive, and so they can be good in acting. I know two of them who are good actresses. It can also be useful in the attention to other people and being able to express. And so this is where they're good at that social advocacy role and charisma, because of those ENF preferences. And so it then serves, the FE is used to serve the role of the advocate, the advocator. Not all ENFP is advocators, but it's a theme that's there. So, and again, fish is water. It's backed up by Dario Nardi's data. A lot of that score, a lot of them will, and that's why I call the type NEFX or NEF. And then we have, and again, all the subfunctions there. Creative will be drawn out, yeah, in the arts, yeah. And the creative FI will be drawn out as well, because again, the NF in the imaginative, yeah, especially useful in actor, yeah. I mean, 2 names for you. You'll probably see them on the channel later on in the year. I hope so. Lauren and Miriam in Wilma's Housemates. Right. So, and then we're going to get into NI. So, the Backseat Driver. So, this is in tension with the NE, but it can provide useful information. And the metaphor with the Backseat Driver of, like, calm down, get a grip. You know, try to go towards the whole plan here rather than going towards what's exciting. Like, don't get distracted, ENFP. Like the Backseat Driver that's like, try and stick to the plan. Like, yes, that's fun. Try to ignore it. Yes, I know what opportunity costs means. So ENFP, imagine the NE in the lead seat would be saying to the backseat, look, you don't know what it's like. I need to do that. I need to do B. I need to do B. I want the opportunity cost. No, you need to do C. So it's like, it doesn't want to miss out. There is a FOMO. The FOMO of ENFP is the fear of missing out on doing these possibilities and the things they want to do. Now, as maturity comes in, it's probably going to be towards, okay, doing those things that, yes, fulfill their NF needs. And so if it's fun, exciting, and fulfills their NF needs, and fulfills a TE need, then you're sort of like onto a winner. And then I'll get onto I'll get onto that next about when TE is used, or it's like to use well in ENFP. Again, Backseat Driver, its intention, Socionics Model A or Model 80s would call it the ignoring function. So with maturity, that is integrated, because otherwise you're just going to have like an ENFP that's just going from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, sort of like a dilettante. But again, developing a sense of direction and focus to balance out the NE. Now, by contrast, the NI DOMs, they might miss some possibilities and options that they could have gone down, but they were so fixated on going with the main path that they missed out on those opportunities. So that's what we got there with NI, and I'm going to emphasize some aspects here. The downtime and the through time aspect of NI. You can see that there, 28 minutes already. Yeah, again, the downtime, you can see that. I'm going to read it out, and then the through time. Right. So, that's that about last with tactics. Well, they can do at times, tactical. It depends, because like, especially ENFP with the EP. But it's sort of like, especially if it's tactics that are morally dubious. TE, now this is important. This can be very strong in ENFP. It depends. So, for example, this function gets drawn on a lot in the workplace. So if we think of Carol Linden, so she has that business, effectivewithpeople.com, and that's being a communications expert. So she's actually their duo. So she's involved in a line of work where she enjoys doing what she's doing. So that ticks the 7 box. And also, if it's ticking the box of diplomatic enabling, which is an associated Kersey intellect with the NFs, diplomatic enabling. So if you're helping people with their communication and you're having fun and it's paying the bills, it's sort of ticking those three boxes, and TE will do work well there. But if you've got like an ENFP in the line of work, say being an accountant, I don't think that's going to last for very long. I don't see an ENFP in like a 20-year career in accountancy. It's got to be fun and it's got to be meaningful, and meaningful in an idealist way. So now with Alicia, she got into real estate. Her mother was also into real estate. She's on there. She's on Facebook as she has a realtor page. More towards the TE. Yeah. She's also a parent, so self-preservation needs coming in there with the TE. Right, but also getting to meet different people, all of that's part of it, with the E and the F preferences. Right. So it can be dabbling, unless there's something else to sort of like make it more interesting. It's got to be something that, and usually it's either an NF thing or an enjoyable thing. Then there's sort of like the motivation there to do the TE stuff. So because an ENFPs tend to be very versatile, and so it's good at many different things. Like you can be that jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah, otherwise it will be dabbling. And again, on that B side column, right? So I'll say, they have that weird thing where ENFP can actually have a mode where they shift to act like an ENTJ, where it's like TENE, which is like the top two extroverting functions of ENTJ. Yeah, I know they're mainly TENI. I'm going to show something now from the posh graphic on the B side. So I'm going to zoom that in. There we go. Hot 4 B side. That's that B side column. So we've got the SI, the TE, and the SI in ENFP. And I'm going to, while I'm at it, put that there. I think that's all about slot 5 and beneficiary shift to the tertiary there. But so I don't forget it, I'm going to be on the other ones later on. Right, so this is, put this on. Right, try. Right, there we go. I don't know how well that's going to focus. But yeah, so that's about the suggestible position. Well, counter club. Right, I should mention that. And then disdained when I get to there later on. Disdained. Right, so let's get back to, I'm on T. Right, oh yeah, so what we have here is it's a default counter club function. So now we're using the ST functions. And the reason why it's counter club is that, well, you've got a feeling preference. So that means that thinking will be under preferred. Still valued, but not preferred as much as feeling. And that's why sensing or sensory instincting is there as well, because intuiting is more favored than sensory instincting. So this is where you got the ST counter club, which is like, and this is where I got the name from. I was going to call it counter nucleus, but then counter club. That's not right, that's INTP. You see here, the counter nucleus of ST functions. Right, I'm going to go back. Am I there? Right. So what does this slot have going for it? Well, it's valued and it's a default function, but it's not a club function. But like I said, it depends if it's enjoyable, EP, and if it's NF. So if you're having fun helping people and it's related to a job, then that's going to work well and it's worked for Carol Linda. That's going to tick those boxes for TE. So another good job for ENFP. Tour guide, maybe? Leading foreign tours. Yeah, go to the stereotypes, man. Hang on a minute, that's not right. Actually, like this. Right, so, and you can see what I've put there for TE. Let's go towards a situational counter club function, which is going to be slot 6. Right, okay. Now we start getting into romance styles and stuff like that. There is a bit of that there, where the any DOMs would prefer that other people take care of the SI needs. So this is why they'll go well with an ISTJ. And so this goes into this bit here, this comfort sensor. They really would like somebody else to take care of that, you know, because they want to be doing like outside fun and adventure fun things rather than the logistical things. Oh, there's an error in this graphic. It doesn't matter. It should be like tactics there. But I'm going to zoom in on SI. I'll read out that bit there. So for the SI DOM, it's that conservative safety first viewpoint. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I want to improve them, so ENFP needs help in this area and appreciates help in this area. So there's a sort of an insulting name for this romance style for the MPs. It got less insulting over the years, but not by much. It went from infantile to childlike. I don't know what the next one will be. What would be the next one? Would be progressively less insulting for us. So in a relationship, NFP would go well with a STJ, an ISTJ, because do all the logistics, do the and apparently when Carol Linden was at an event, they sort of asked the audience of ENFPs, or the significant, how many of you are married to ISTJs, and like 8 of them put their hands up. So it's like, it does go well. And you can also say that ask your MBTI people and like ask your ENFPs what they think of ISTPs. Not much. And if you ask ISTPs what they think of ENFPs, you'll have a very low impression. And that's one of the ways that I would say that MBTI and sort of like Western type has ISTJ and ENFP the right way around. You know, because sometimes ISTJs gets typed as LSI in Socionics, which is functionally opposite valued functions. So there you go. Now, unless you're going to say that all the MBTI ENFPs are ENFJs, but that's unlikely, given how obvious ENFPs can be in their any usage. So yeah, mainly it's okay. So usually Socionics would put like art with SI, but Lauren's a good artist. She's an ENFP. Miriam's good at music. So the imaginative, I imagine that's used quite a bit by those two. Comfort sensing depends on the sort of development. I'm not really asked them about that. With Carol, she didn't appreciate help in that area because I think she said that her mother was ISTJ. And so she ended up doing quite a bit of TE stuff when she was younger. Actually worked in a business with computing and like being in charge of writing instruction manuals, because she said she was fed on a diet of TE. So, and again, suggestible. So they are attracted towards SI DOMs, provide stability in their lives and take care of the mundane parts of life. Again, as a weak function, it's a situational counter club function. It's like it's away from, in that it's again, it's a counter club. It's not the NF function, and it's situational. It's not a default function. So these, from that point of view, these are the two weakest. Arguably SE is. It sort of depends, because, and I'll go on to that next, SE. So I think it depends on the ENFP. Like, so for example, if you've got an ENFP that's Enneagram 9 fixated, might have stronger SI. An Enneagram 7 fixated ENFP, especially a core 7, will draw on SE more, because the fun and adventure activities, whilst pursuing those opportunities for adventure and personal growth, that NF kind of fun and adventure, that those possibilities that journey will also draw on SE in terms of being in the moment and concentrating and being able to survive. And it's like, hey, how did you survive in that situation? So it's like they're going to be using some SE to like just survive, be aware of their environment so as not to get into trouble. So I would say that the Enneagram 7 ENFP, probably quite strong SE. Depends, because it's what the situation draws on. The situation will draw on that function. Concentrate, pay attention. It's like using some force and stoic stuff. Yeah. So in comparing slot 6 and slot 7, so slot 6 has going for it that it's valued, and slot 7 has going for it that it's a default function. So I thought it sort of depends on development as to which is stronger. Yeah. It depends. Yeah. In general, that is the strength of the functions. Like on average, it's a pretty safe bet to say NE is the strongest function in ENFP and FI second. And the data would show that it's those. The data would show that it's like these 5 are always in the top 4. And sometimes some people will score TE higher up. But you see, people can overrate their TE. Eyes are bigger than the belly function, I call it. The TE. Oh, you really want it, then you're halfway, you've eaten half of it, and it's like, I'm full up now. Eyes are bigger than your belly. So, a bit on instinctor, up time and in time. So, yeah, I mean, if you've got a very adventuresome ENFP, then, like, that's got to draw on SE. Got to. Live for the moment, yeah. As Jeff said, ENFPs are just like ESFPs, except ENFPs believe in stuff. Right. And so they're going to be in uptime and in time in the moment. So, but they can also get like self-distracted. So an ENFP can distract itself just by an idea popping into its head. I know, I feel your pain. Oh, you got distracted. You had an idea. That's a good thing, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe not to the other person. You're not with it today, Ben. I'm an MP. That's how we are. Not really with it. So, and then we get on to TI. Now, this is an interesting one because this is not all too often. TI is associated with reasoning power, but that is because TP is the actual cognitive process of introverting thinking relies on reasoning power for its irrational elaboration. And it's a rational elaboration from a subjective premise because it's not really going towards data. And so socionics especially is confused sort of like formal logic with TI. So, which doesn't explain why you can have ENFPs with high IQs in logical and mathematical intelligence. It's a different thing from TI. They are related though. Now, one of the issues is now the way Dario Nardi defines TI is he sort of has it as gaining leverage for a framework, and I think that's too much bias towards TI and NTPs. But abstract thinking, ENFPs are good at because they are abstract types. So ENFPs are more familiar with theories and abstract thinking than ESFPs. So to what extent are ENFPs TI vulnerable? Well, an NTP might say that certain times younger ENFPs won't listen to a certain line of, say, the only examples I can think of is sort of like a libertarian line of logic, line of reasoning where the ENFP doesn't listen to it and they go with their ideal. So, for example, if the NTP goes through all of the sort of like economics of what you subsidize, you get more of, what you tax, you get less of, and the sort of like that you can have the opposite result intended from certain laws. And what would happen, and if they go through the TI of, okay, so you could say to ENFP who believes in the minimum wage, the TI person could say, the libertarian would say, okay, what would happen if the minimum wage was set at $50 an hour? What would happen? What would happen? What would the employer do when that job is not worth $50 an hour? They'll try to eliminate the job because it's not economical. And then for those that do, and then what does it do for entry-level jobs? And all of these kind of like TE and TI arguments that go against these strongly held convictions. And that's where the TI polar can come out, when it's like the temperament is getting in the way. And also another example would be anti-discrimination laws can actually lead to more discrimination. So, for example, the TI argument might be, well, if you're having all of these anti-discrimination laws, someone then might hire the person who's least likely to sue you over discrimination. And then it's like, so that leads to more discrimination. And so, but here's the thing. If the person was discriminating and said, oh, you discriminate against me, but I hired you. But if they hired the person, how can they be discriminating? So it actually leads to more discrimination. But the TI person then might argue, but that's what they want anyway, because the party that advocates anti-discrimination laws wants more discrimination in order to get more votes. So it's counterproductive from an employer's point of view, because the employer is trying to minimize their legal liability. So they have two candidates. If I choose candidate A, this person could sue me. If I choose candidate B, this person can't sue me over that. So you've actually made it more likely to discriminate against candidate A by trying to protect them. So all sort of unintended consequences, and these kind of like TI kind of arguments that like ENFP is not so good with these arguments because they are very triggering. Because they're going towards the intent of the legislation. Yeah, this is stuff I picked up from Peter Schiff, who can sometimes say some like FI polar stuff. Right. So yeah, that's sort of the most I sort of picked up with, but again, that's not all ENFP is. I would think they're going to go towards empirical thinking, the T and the R abstract, and maybe sometimes when the TI is not good, is that they can get around that and have an NE shortcut. So I'm not really sure what TI polar can look like otherwise in ENFP, unless it's sort of like the thing maybe an ISTP might criticize the ENFP for, such as a sort of challenge on Grinder here, as a co-founder of NLP, is he might say, oh, they might make a complex equivalence between two things that shouldn't be, that this doesn't mean that, or making an odious comparison and not concentrating on the specifics. But that would be sort of an ISTP critique of ENFP. Right then, is there anything else? Right, oh yes, I should have shown this before. So qualities of intuition, if you want to pause that. This is from Van der Hoop's Conscious Orientation. He died in 1950, so it is now out of copyright. It is over 70 years since he died. Oh yes, all of the Model Vs, all of them. Right. And in this graphic, always the collaborators are always in the top right. There are the collaborators. Here are the accommodators. The initiators. The contenders. Right. All right. Yeah, so this is about the importance of clubs in Dario Nardi, if you want to see that. And so that bottom one there is for ENFJ. So if the highest scores are extroverting feeling with support process, introverted intuiting, and extroverted intuiting, then the bottom half is usually home to low scorers, sensing and thinking. Well, that will lose its wow factor when I say this. Well, if you've already got 3 of the 4 top slots with NF functions in it, you've only got 1 slot left, and so the sensing and thinking are going to be in the bottom half out of necessity, because you've already got slots 1, 2, and 3 filled with NI, NE, and FE. So you've only got 1 slot available, so it loses its wow factor. But that shows the point. It shows the club functions. And it says there, this suggests that pairs of functions such as sensing thinking, sensing feeling, intuiting thinking, intuitive thinking are highly relevant. That's the thing. I even got a mention in Dario's latest paper about my notation when I say something like NEFX. Right. Because he calls it the tricycle formation. What else do we have here? Oh, I did that. Plesp planes. Right. Right then. So the NE, you sort of see that certain any looks when someone's like ideating, it's like, or someone having any moment, you can sort of maybe pick that up. Linguistically, maybe get some NF language from ENFP, some metaphorical language. EEG patterns, like the Christmas tree pattern, like different areas which you can on off, but you need an EEG for that, and the right way to interpret it. Role enactments, yeah, going towards diplomatic enabling roles again. No, psychological, that's just like Jungian plane of the function. What else? Oh, done that. Oh, various roles. Right. So other roles that ENFP can do well. Well, I would say here these performing roles and composer. That's literally Miriam who's done that. And Miriam and Lauren will be the performer role. So all these diplomatic enabling roles are sort of like tick boxes for NFs. Inspector's going to be tricky for ENFP. It's that level of detail. I find the job boring. Yeah, something like might take them too long to go through. That'd be a video in itself. Oh yeah, so about instinct. So I'm just gonna pause this. Well, you can pause that and take in what I've written there about in studying. So this is talking about when Van der Hoek, who was trained by Jung in describing SE DOMs, the sensation types, in studying their mode of adaptation, I saw, in fact, more and more clearly that they were not guided exclusively by their sensations, but by their sensations coupled with their emotional reactions thereto, and further by their instinctual needs as well. And there's a bit more. Practical instinctive knowledge which results from emphasis and sensation, which is different from perception. Perception is different. Perception is object recognition and sort of facial expression recognition and depth perception cues and things like that, which is different from, and perception is related to thought. I mean, cognitive, that's in line with cognitive psychology. Oh yes, this is also what I've highlighted here is shows it's more than just sensor. So you've got gut instincts there. Exciting is more than just sensor. Impulses is more than just sensor. You want to take action, that's more than just sensor. Thrill of action, feeling the thrill. See, the emotion there is bound up with it, is right. Spur action and get results, so that's more assertive kind of SE. It's more than just sensing. It's not just sensory acuity, which is how you would get to a definition if you intersected two ideas, extraverting, so empiricalizing, with sensor. If you were to intersect those two ideas, you would get empirical sensor, which would basically just be sensory acuity and sort of some ability of somebody to pay attention. You wouldn't get to thrill of action and that from that definition. The other functions you can get there by intersecting ideas. So, for example, if you intersect thinking with extraverting, then you can get to a definition of TE. So this is because instinct is involved. So the artisan instinct on the left and the guardian instinct on the right. So follow the work ideas and examples of that's more than just sensor. You've got an impulse to trust authority, accustomed to. Customary is standard because it's small c conservative, it's stabilizing, opposite of developing. Feel inclined to, trust solutions, again, trust, feeling and emotion, stabilizing the past, reliable, comfortable. There's more there than just sensor. It's sensory instinctum. What else? Is that the end? That's the end. The end of ENFP Model V. Or Model Vaserlan, because there's too many other Model V stuff out there. So, although Model Vaserlan isn't in there, it's a bit big-headed. Right.